Greetings, everyone. Good day or good evening, depending on which time zone you are joining in from. We'll just take a couple of minutes, wait for other people to join in, and then we'll begin today's session. Till then, you can continue to practice your smile. I was just mentioning during one interview, it's almost funny how often we have to be reminded to smile. But it's not a bad thing. At least during this retreat, I will be reminding you frequently. And we'll talk about why it is important also. Great. So let's get started. First of all, I want to reinforce with everyone. I met a lot of you today for our daily check-ins, and we were able to take a look at your progress, see any problems you are having with your practice, any doubts that you had, and uh, look at how you can tweak and fine-tune your practice. Okay. Those of you who have not booked your slots, please do that for tomorrow as well and for the rest of the week. So these check-ins will be happening every day. This is a specialty of this practice that you're somebody who's actually walked the territory, been through that territory, they have a very good idea of where you are in your practice, and the progress is very structured. It's you can identify the different stages of progress that you are at, and your practice can be fine-tuned to match that progress. Okay, so we will be checking in daily and making tweaks and making sure we get a lot of progress during this retreat. Okay, so just a reminder, please do book your slots for tomorrow and for the rest of the week. There is a Calendly link. I will send that link again after this talk. If you're not able to join during any of the slots that are shared, then there is a Google form. It is in line with the kind of questions that I ask you during your check-in, and you can just fill in the Google form. I will have a look at that and send you any suggestions that I have or any clarifications over email. Okay. So yeah, just wanted to reinforce that. The second important part is the morning group meditation. So you can join in for that. It is useful because we do the precept, the morning routine, the taking the refuges, taking the precepts, and reading the Dhammapad verses together. And we start the practice for a lot of you, I've recommended sitting more than 30 minutes. So this is a 30-minute sitting. If you've been asked to sit longer and you plan to use that time to sit longer, sit for 45 minutes. If you find that the time does not suit you, please sit at a convenient time. You don't need to join the group meditation. It's an option that is available, and it is very useful if that time suits you. Okay, so that starts at 6 a.m. every day. Okay, great. So with the logistics out of the way, we'll start today's session. I'll just take a minute to recap what we discussed yesterday. Right. So yesterday we talked about why pay attention to attention, right? And we could see when we reflected on it, and I'm sure many of you started seeing it more deeply in your practice, in your daily life today as you started paying attention to it. Our experience of life is governed by attention. So it is not determined only by our situation. You could be sitting on a beach, you could be sitting on a mountaintop, you could be in an office, but your mind could be elsewhere. You may not register anything that is happening around you. You can be perfectly happy in the worst of external circumstances, and you can be perfectly miserable in the best of external circumstances. So, what's happening around you, what information is coming to you, is not the important part. What is important is where your attention is. Your experience of life is a sequence of attention moving from one thought process to the next, and so on. One thought process, one activity, and so that's why we want to start paying attention to attention. We want to start exercising it by keeping an anchor, placing our attention with one thing. For that, we are using the object of metta or loving kindness. So I've not used this term so far. It's there in the prep kit and the beginning practice, but metta or loving kindness. This is coming from the root word of maitri in Sanskrit. It is friendship, friendliness. So the kind of goodwill that you have towards a friend, we are building up that feeling. We are learning to develop that feeling. Okay? We are sending it to ourselves first and then to a friend. Okay. This is the object. This is the anchor. And how are we learning about attention? How are we learning about how our mind works? We're keeping it here. Every time our attention wanders away, we recognize, let that thought be, relax any tightness in our mind, smile, and come back. Okay, so by doing this again and again, we will start to train the first skill, which is mindfulness. So mindfulness remembers that your attention is with your object. Mindfulness remembers to observe when your attention is not with your object. Second skill is harmonious practice or 6 R's. Being able to get your mind out of a distraction without fighting with it. So you are literally, the more you give importance to it, the bigger it's going to become, the harder it becomes something to defeat. Instead, by relaxing and smiling, you're not giving it that importance, simply coming back to your object of meditation. Okay, so these are the first two skills, mindfulness and harmonious practice, that we are learning. Okay, so today we are going to unpack a little bit more about distractions, about the things that take our attention away. So when I say distractions, I'm using it as a term for anything that is taking our attention away that was not intended. We wanted to keep our attention with something. It could be work, it could be exercise, it could be play, it could be anything. It could be a conversation, it could be your meditation object. A distraction is anything that takes your attention away from that without intention. Okay. So today we'll talk a little bit about distraction, and I will also introduce some excerpts from the Buddha's discourses. Okay, so these are called suttas. I'll share some excerpts from that. I'll also talk about how these have been used in the oral tradition of teaching. Okay, great. So let me share my screen and let's talk about how distractions come up. Okay, so we want to get deeper, and now we have understood that distractions come up, take our attention away. We understand also that there is a way to bring them back. We also understand there is a skill involved with identifying them. So let's now start getting more into how distractions come up. So as we talked, our experiences of life is this sequence. Then we want to start understanding this sequence at a very granular level. I will repeat things a lot because every time I repeat things, they will land differently. Every time we talk, every time we connect, you have practiced, you have observed some things in your mind, your mindfulness and harmonious practice has sharpened a little bit. When I repeat things the next time, they will land in a different way. Okay. So when I repeat, it is part of the oral tradition of teaching. So I'll just quickly share my screen. We'll just talk about the anatomy of distraction. Can you see my screen? Okay, great. So this is how you start. You bring up that happy memory, that warm feeling. You start wishing it for yourself, and then you wish it for a friend. So that is your object of meditation, and you have a field of attention. Your object of meditation is there. there will be some things happening in the background. They're not necessarily taking your attention away. There are some sounds you're hearing, right? There may be some kind of wind coming from a fan or an AC, and there may be other things happening. Some people will have a tendency to listen to start hearing music in their minds if they listen to a lot of music, right? So things happen in the field of attention. So one thing we have to remember is if something is happening in the background, we don't have to use the 6 hours. As long as the object of meditation is in the foreground. We know that our attention is with sending that feeling to ourselves or to our friends. We don't have to use the 6 hours. Now, what happens is after some time, distraction starts coming up and it starts growing. Suddenly, your mind goes to that, I need to do this next. Or what about that thing I forgot to do? Or can I do this? Right? Or I want to do that. Something or the other will come up and it will start taking your attention, and slowly your object of meditation fades away. And you start staying with this, and suddenly you remember, oh, my mind is distracted. Now I need to bring it back. So just going back, this is the way the process happens. So a lot of things will come up without your attention being attached to it. They will go away. Some things will go up, start growing more and more in your field of attention, and eventually your object will disappear from your field of attention. Okay. Now, what we need to understand is this is a great, very important point. We don't ask these distractions to come up. We don't decide that, okay, 45 seconds into my sitting, I'm going to start thinking about what I need to do in 1 hour. So we don't decide to do that. It just pops up. We don't say 2.5 minutes later, I'm going to think about what my colleague said to me yesterday. Okay, and I didn't like it. It was very disrespectful. Or 5 minutes into my sitting, I'm going to have an opinion. I'm going to disagree vehemently with an opinion from a political leader, right? So we don't plan that. These things come up, and if we don't stay with the object, if we start paying attention to the distraction, then they occupy our mind. So why is it important to understand this distinction? Normally, what we remember our life. So coming up to now, even if you trace your thoughts, you think I was thinking this, then I was thinking this, then I was thinking this, then I was thinking this. But we never think about why did I bring this? Why did I think about this? Did I decide to think about this, or did it just come up on its own? So this is a very important distinction to understand how things come up and they may take your attention away. So the important thing to notice, the distraction is an impersonal phenomenon. You did not ask for it to come up. It came up, and what sustains it is this mechanism that we call craving. Remember this word craving, we will repeat it multiple times over the next few days. It's also very important because the Buddha basically said two things, right? He said there's only one thing that I teach, which is how to bring about the end of suffering. And the second most important thing he said is the basis of suffering is craving. It's a mechanism. So craving is not just that I like ice cream, I crave for ice cream every day. That is also a manifestation of craving, but craving is a very micro level mechanism that is active in your mind as well. If your mind gets attached with craving, with a distraction, if your attention continues to be with that, your attention is that fuel for that distraction to be. So you will see that some things come up and they disappear on their own. Your attention, you don't start thinking about them, but some things you start thinking about them. And when you start using the 6 hours, you also start understanding that there is a little tightness. This tightness is what is attaching your attention to that thought. And this tightness is a tangible manifestation of craving. Okay. So this is something we need to start getting aware of. The second thing we need to understand is every thought that comes up is an impersonal phenomenon. You did not ask for it to come. Every distraction that happens. If you intend to do something, that's a very different thing. If you don't intend to go into a certain thought process and it has come up, it is not you. It has come up. But in a moment, if you pay attention to it, if you get attached to it with craving, if you take it personally, it becomes you. It becomes, I forgot to do that, or I did not like what that person said to me, or I need to do this. Okay, so just something came up. So think of it like going through TV channels, right? So you're going through TV channels and suddenly you stop on a horror movie, and in a couple of minutes you start feeling the same fear as the protagonist over there, and then you have to remind yourself this is just a movie. So it's literally happening like that. Something came up, just because you stuck there, you stayed there for a while, you start identifying with it. It becomes you. It doesn't become a thought that has come up, and maybe it needs some action, or maybe it doesn't need some action. Maybe it just needs to be set aside because we are involved with something else. We can't think like that when our mind gets attached to that distraction with craving. Okay, so this was the first thing that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to now read a small excerpt from a sutta. So, suttas are discourses of the Buddha, and very useful to understand the teaching tradition of that time, right? So, one, the teaching was oral. So, when we hear things, it lands in a very different part of our mind. We understand it very differently. So, when we learn language, we actually learn language from people around us when we are listening to them. And we learn it in a very different way when we read things. So the oral tradition has a certain way of being administered or certain way of being understood. One of the things that really works is here is suttas. So every sutta is like a sutra, literally means thread. Okay. And what's happening is all these threads talk about different aspects of the natural phenomena. So if any of you attended the morning session, we were talking about the word Dhamma, what it means in the Buddha's teaching. The word Dhamma has three connotations. It may mean the natural law of human experience, of mental experience, right? So, what is like physics? We have a set of laws. There is a way in which the mental mechanisms work. So, that is one definition of Dhamma. The other connotation is the teaching that conveys this. Okay. And the third connotation is actual mental phenomena that form up that mass of experience. Okay. So the Dhamma is like a fabric, and each thread represents an aspect of that. So each sutta has a certain set of concepts or certain set of uh, understanding that is related to this overall manifestation of mental experience. And as we hear different suttas, it lands in different parts of our mind and it starts to form that concrete fabric for us. So even during these 9 days, the talks that I'm giving are kind of a contemporary representation of some of the suttas. I'll also be reading some of the actual suttas. They have their own power. They have been specially written for the oral tradition and they've been spoken by the Buddha. So obviously, we can assume that he had a good idea of what he was doing. Okay. So I'll start with the sutta. I'll be reading suttas from the middle length discourses of the Buddha. The first one that I'll be reading is from the Satipathan Sutra. So interesting thing. So over the last 200 years, the most of the Vipassana movement derives the practices from this one sutta. Okay, so it's a long sutta. I'll be reading only a small excerpt. In the twin tradition, we actually look at all 152 suttas of the mid-length discourses, the Majjhima Nikaya, and we see how the practice actually derives from all those different suttas. Just wanted to give that little bit of context. So these are all from the middle length discourses. This is sutta number 10, the Sati Pathan or the foundations of mindfulness. Okay, so I'll read the excerpt from the sutta and then we'll discuss what is being talked about. And how, students, does a student abide contemplating mental phenomena as mental phenomena? Here, a student abides contemplating mental phenomena as mental phenomena in terms of the five distractions or five hindrances. And how does a student abide contemplating mental phenomena as mental phenomena in terms of the five hindrances? Here, there being no greed in him, a student understands there is greed in me, or there being no greed in him, he understands there is no greed in me. And he also understands how there comes to be the arising of unarisen greed and how there comes to be the abandoning of arisen greed and how there comes to be the future non-arising of abandoned greed. There being aversion in him, a student understands there is aversion in me. There being no aversion in him, he understands there is no aversion in me. And he also understands how there comes to be the arising of unarisen aversion and how there comes to be the abandoning of arisen aversion and how there comes to be the future non-arising of abandoned aversion. There being sloth and torpor in him, a student understands there is sloth and torpor in me. Or there being no sloth and torpor in him, he understands there is no sloth and torpor in me. And he also understands how there comes to be the arising of unarisen sloth and torpor, how there comes to be the abandoning of arisen sloth and torpor, and how there comes to be the future non-arising of abandoned sloth and torpor. There being restlessness and remorse in him, a student understands there is restlessness and remorse in me. Or there being no restlessness and remorse in him, he understands there is no restlessness and remorse in me. And he also understands how there comes to be the arising of unarisen restlessness and remorse, and how there comes to be the abandoning of arisen restlessness and remorse, and how there comes to be the future non arising of abandoned restlessness and remorse. There being doubt in him, a student understands there is doubt in me. Or there being no doubt in him, he understands there is no doubt in me. And he also understands how there comes to be the arising of unarisen doubt, how there comes to be the abandoning of arisen doubts, and how there comes to be the future non arising of abandoned doubts. In this way, he abides contemplating mental phenomena as mental phenomena internally, or he abides contemplating mental phenomena as mental phenomena externally, or he abides contemplating mental phenomena as mental phenomena both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in mental phenomena, their nature of arising. He abides contemplating in mental phenomena, their nature of vanishing. Or he abides contemplating in mental phenomena, their nature of both arising and vanishing. Or else mindfulness that there are mental phenomena is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides, a student abides, contemplating mental phenomena as mental phenomena in terms of the five hindrances. think already you can see the amount of repetition that happens. So we look at the quickly. I'll share some visual aids. We are very visually trained creatures in this era, so this should be helpful. So let's just unpack some of the things the Buddha talked about. Okay. So the Buddha talks about 5 different types of hindrances. Hindrances is similar to distractions. Okay. The Pali word is Nivaran. Nivaran is literally obstacle. Okay. Obstacle to your mental progress. Anything that is taking your mind away without you intending. And the Buddha says these come in 5 broad flavors, and your distraction will have multiple compounded flavors or multiple versions. So there are two twins, greed and aversion, restlessness and sloth. We'll talk about them. And then there is a fifth sibling, doubt. Okay. So greed is the I like it mind. When your mind gets trapped in a thought saying, I want this, I want this. Okay. I'm very excited for the holiday that I'm going to be taking, or I'm really waiting for my year end bonus, or I'm waiting for the festival that is coming next week, or I'm waiting to watch a movie that is releasing someday, or I'm wanting to have something deep fried. So these are kind of flavors of greed. It can be also related to infatuation, it can be related to multiple things. I want it. So your mind says, I want it. Second flavor, the twin of this polar opposite in nature, is aversion. I don't want it. I don't like it. Why did that person say this to me? Why did I not get that promotion? Okay. Why does all the responsibility fall on me? Why do I have so many things? Why wasn't I born richer so I have these troubles in my life? Or why is my health like this? Why could it not be better? So these are thoughts of aversion. I don't like it. Things that you don't like. Or why did this person do something to me? Why did that person say something? The other set of twins, restlessness and sloth. Restlessness is going after one thing or the other. Your mind can have a tendency not to want to stay still, and this is not very unnatural behavior. From our evolution, we are used to always scan the environment for signals. We are always trying to see if there are threats in the environment. Is there an animal in the bushes that may attack me? Is it about to rain? Is it about to snow? Is there an earthquake? Am I is the food that I'm about to eat, is it going to be poisonous? There are lots of things that our ancestors had to be very careful about. So they were always the human mind was developed to be always scanning the environment for information. And these could be threats or these could be opportunities. You have to, can I get a meal by doing something? Or what are the opportunities? Do I have enough time to go and hunt or gather before my body starts to become weak from starvation? Is that a fruit that I'm seeing? Is that an animal that I can hunt? So the other thing that our evolutionary mechanism says, always look for opportunities. Is that a potential may? Okay. So there is restlessness. Do try always scan for information. And this, we are all used to it when we are scrolling on one of the great attention economy devices of today, right? So scrolling on Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, news, whatever app you may use. I'm probably out of date. Uh, so restlessness is always checking your phone. Is there some new information? Okay. Always, if you're a cricket fan, always checking the score. Has my life changed? Because something happened in a cricket match, or something like that. So restlessness and its twin, sloth. So restlessness is related to continuous information seeking, stimulation seeking behavior, and sloth comes from overstimulation or stimulation fatigue, right? So your mind continues to go after different things, but it has no alertness, it has no engagement. It is just ho humming, right? So thoughts are coming, going. Your mind is not with the object. Mind is not with what you're doing. Your mind is not with anything that is coming up either. And you can see it. Right? You have no motivation to do something. You're just sitting in sloth. You may be scrolling, but you don't even remember what you're looking for. You're half sleepy and you're scrolling, right? So that is the polar opposite of stimulation seeking behavior, which is stimulation fatigue. These are so the greed and aversion are closely linked. Restlessness and sloth are closely linked. They're kind of the complements of each other. And then we have the king of it, which is doubt. Am I doing this right? Am I worthy? Fear is kind of a subset of doubt. Will I be able to do that? Will my future be certain? Will I be secure? Will I be safe? All these are thoughts. And what do we remember from the earlier discussion? That these thoughts come up. We don't decide to get into these thought processes. When we are in them, we feel like this is the most important thing in the world. Why am I not? I have to be thinking about it. But the reality is you are actually doing something else. These things came up, took up your mind, and you will probably not come up with any answers or any actions that are actually going to change your life, but just waste an enormous amount of emotional energy, effort, and time cycling through these hindrances. They are hindrances to your progress. So these are the five flavors of hindrances. They can come together. So you may have a hindrance of greed. Suddenly you remember that your mind is caught up in that, and then you will have aversion arise. You'll judge yourself. I can't even keep my mind on the object. You will have doubt arise. You will feel, am I good enough to do it? Am I doing it correctly? Am I doing it incorrectly? Is this even meant for me? Will I ever find peace in life? So those kind of things can come up. But what we also need to remember is distractions are like our teachers and personal trainers. What does a distraction tell? So you may have paid a electricity bill 15 years back, or you may have written an exam in fourth standard, seventh standard, something, whenever. You don't really remember that. Why is it? Why do you remember something? Why does something come and take your attention away? It could be even from the very much from the past, or it could be very present. So what are the things? So recency is a very important thing. Things that happened just before, things that are going to happen just after, because the mind says, okay, this is something clear and present in our environment, right? So if I see tiger tracks today, for the next 3-4 days, I'm going to be on the lookout that there is a probability of a tiger being. So if I got a deadline for next week, then for the next few days, I'm going to remember that I have to meet the deadline, otherwise I'll be in trouble, right? The distractions tell us where our attachments lie, what we take personally, what we like or dislike. It is related to things that may be recent. It is related to things that are unresolved, right? So if you have a resolution, there is no action related to paying that bill. There is nothing personal about it. It is done and dusted. It's in the past. It's very unlikely. Maybe because I've talked about it now, your mind will throw up something like that. But typically, things that come up in our mind are things that we take personally. Judgments of ourselves, self doubt, greed, wanting something to happen. I like it. I want that to happen. I want that to come into my life. Dislike. I don't want that. I don't want it in my life. It should never. So the distractions tell us where our attachments lie, what the tendency of our mind is. Is it my tendency to go towards greed? Is it to go towards doubt? So we understand how our attention is moving and what are the things that are bothering. And we can also start to realize whether we are actually gaining something from engaging in that distraction, or are we just wasting our emotional energy and our happiness as a result of that. The other thing that the distractions do are every time a distraction comes up, it is a reminder for us to use the 6 hours. Every time we use the 6 hours, we are strengthening our practice. We are strengthening our mindfulness. We are strengthening our harmonious practice or the 6 hours ability to get your mind out of a rabbit hole or a simple distraction without fighting with it, right? And every time we learn to do that, very interesting things will happen. I'll just talk about that. So think of your distraction as a teacher or a personal trainer. A teacher because it teaches where our attachments lie, what may be unresolved in our mind, what the tendency of our mind is. They teach us how our mind's attention moves from one thing to another. And we can think of them as a personal trainer because they are asking us to
I think Rajiv dropped off. We'll just wait for him to get back. He's back.
great. So this seems like a regular feature of the internet. Okay, great. So I was talking about how distractions are like our teachers because they teach us about our mind, tendencies of our mind, unresolved issues, what we take personally. And they're like our personal trainers because they're asking us to train our skills, train the skills that are actually going to help us deal with our mind more effectively. So don't fight with distractions. Don't judge yourself. If a distraction comes up, treat it as a victory. Every time you recognize that your attention is caught up in a distraction, treat it as a victory, treat it as a gift, and every time you bring it back successfully, treat that as a victory, treat that as a gift. So you got to train the most important skills. Okay. So that is what distractions teach us to do. I'm going to quickly just talk about what happens when you use these two skills. Okay. So something interesting will start to happen as you start using these skills. Okay. So you have a distraction, treat it as a gift, treat it as a victory that you recognized it. Your mindfulness came into being, came into action. These are the exclamation mark representing mindfulness. You used the right effort, the harmonious practice, 6 hours, recognized that your mind is distracted, release that thought, relax the tension and tightness. This tension and tightness is what holds your attention with that thought. You relax it. You don't fight with it. If you fight with it, you make it more important. You make it like that tiger, right? So something your mind pays attention to continuously, your mind learns that this is important in my life. This I take personally. This is important for Rajiv, right? So then that thought will come up. So we are actually giving the value to that distraction. So think about if you're living in a big city and you will see poor behavior on the road, right? You'll see somebody cut you off and you simply say, okay, maybe that person had something urgent to attend to, and you let it be. That is similar to relaxing the tension and tightness. So relaxing the craving associated with that. You didn't like it, the distraction came up. It was a distraction of the flavor of aversion, but you relaxed the tension and you came back. Or else you can take offense at that. You may decide to follow up on that person. You may want to overtake them. You may want to honk at them. You may want to get next to them at the signal so you can shout at them, and you're not letting it be. So by not relaxing the tension, not understanding that you did not decide to bring it up, it happened because the conditions were right for it. There were conditions that so either thing, when things come up in your mind, the conditions were right for it. something somebody said triggered off something that you have to get done within a time frame triggered that thought up. So it came up. You did not bring it up. Conditions were right for that thought to come up, and you took it personally. You allowed your attention to continue with that and feed that thought with craving. So then that becomes larger and larger. It starts to become like the tiger that our ancestors would have wanted to deal with. So it might have been, there might be nothing. You might just feel that you have seen tiger tracks and you start creating that tiger in your mind. Or the alternate story that you can refer to it, right? Like the boy who cried wolf. So there is no wolf, but the boy just likes to get everybody's attention, get some action happening. So he says there is a wolf, right? And actually there is no wolf. So when the person is cutting you off in traffic, there is actually no wolf. That is just some person who did something either foolish or something that was a compulsion for them. But in our mind, we can make it into a wolf and we can cry wolf, but there is actually no wolf to deal with at that time. So the craving, the tension and tightness, and your attention. The combination of these two is the fuel for making that distraction from something that came up to something that is the most important thing in your life at that moment. That you're willing to risk your own safety just to be able to chase and fight with that other person who's driving their vehicle. So as we use the 6 hours, your mind starts to understand, okay, we are here, we have dedicated this time to do something. In this case, we have dedicated this time to meditate. And every time our attention goes to something else, we are teaching our mind, hey, this is not life threatening, this is not existential at the moment. These 30 minutes that I've allowed, given myself permission to be happy for myself, for my friend, belongs to me. Let me use that 30 minutes. That's not the time to do this. So your mind starts to learn. Your mind starts to learn, hey, there is no wolf. This is just a boy that cried wolf. This distraction that has come up. I don't need to pay attention. There is no existential threat. There is no life-changing opportunity in that thought. You keep coming back. Again, your mind gets distracted. It is the tendency of the mind. There is still some craving. Even though you know there is no wolf, there is still some doubt. So the second time, so like in the story, every time the boy cries wolf, there are fewer and fewer villagers who come to the boy's help, and eventually nobody comes. And unfortunately, then actually a tiger comes, but hopefully a wolf comes, but hopefully no wolf will come for you during your setting. For that setting, for that session, you have insulation from that. And that is the advantage, right? So with human cooperation, the growth of human society, we can actually afford to do things like meditate. If we were living in the jungle, it might have been a very different scenario. But with human society, we actually have that opportunity to be safe in a space and to actually meditate for some time, develop these skills so we can bring them into the rest of our life, even that if that life is in a more challenging circumstance. So as we keep doing this, our mind says, okay, this is what Rajiv really wants. He wants that we stay with that object of meditation. And it also seems that everything else that I'm bringing up is not really serious. It is not really an existential threat or life-changing opportunity at this moment. So your mind starts to get collected. It starts to get calm. It starts to get stable. And this is the third skill. So there are many collected states. So once you start doing this, some of you have experienced some joy come up, some of you have experienced some other phenomena. Through this retreat, all of you will experience different states of collectedness. Okay. These can be called different states of consciousness, different states of collectedness. They will be very different from what you experience in normal life. In these states, your mind becomes stable, effortlessly stays with the object of meditation, doesn't go running after distraction, and it's a very wholesome base. So what we are learning, why is collectedness important? Is important because currently we don't have a wholesome base for our attention to be in. So our attention just like a nomad, it is just going to one thing after another thing. If we are not able to stay there for too long, it is looking for other pieces of information. If we have nothing that we have planned to do, we have no intention, then a million things will come and fill up that time. So our attention does not have a home base. It is a nomad, and there will be always some thought, some distraction that comes and fills up the vacuum. if you don't have an intention, if you don't have something to do, if you don't have a wholesome home base to come back to. And what we are doing with Metta, with loving kindness, is creating a wholesome home base. So we are either doing something, some activity. If we are not, if we have time, we are actually bringing the mind to a wholesome base instead of chasing after random distractions, which don't lead to any action, which don't lead to any insight, but make us feel more agitated, emotional, miserable at times. Great. So that's all I wanted to cover. This is a teaser for tomorrow's discussion. We'll be talking about, so there are many different states, 8 different states of collectedness that we can develop and experience. And they're extremely restorative states. So they're extremely healing for our mind and body. They're like, you know, a safe space for you, safe and wholesome space where you actually heal and develop yourself. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. I will take a pause. I've been speaking for a long time without a break. So happy to hear any thoughts, any questions, anything that resonated with your practice or what you've been seeing in your day. Sharing is also very valuable. It doesn't necessarily need to be a question, because when you share things, it may bring up interesting things for others to reflect on.
Can we have a recording of the 6 a.m. meditation session as well?
Sure, we'll do a recording of that tomorrow.
Because I can't make it for that 6 a.m. It's 1:30 in the night for me. So.
Okay, we'll share that.
Thank you.
Rajiv, I have a question.
Yes.
So in distractions, one of the things you mentioned was unresolved issues. And I'm sure all of us have a whole range of those issues. And how do you deal with that through the meditation? Because they will keep coming back again and again. So you can push them away, but they don't really go away. So how do you deal with something like that over time?
So excellent question. Okay, really, this is, I think, something you hit the crux of, like how to deal with things, right? So the first thing that you said, we don't push them away. 6 hours are not a stick to deal with it. So what is happening now? One thing is unresolved issues. You either have an action to do with it. So take climate change, okay? Or, for example, if you want to change the political regime in your city or state or whatever, right? Or country or whatever it is. You can either be aligned to take action on that. Climate change, I'm going to take 5 actions. I'm going to change, everything in my house into sustainable things. I will take public transport or whatever. You can decide some actions, and I will sign on petitions. I will buy an EV as my next vehicle. You have a bunch of actions. And then there is worry. Like, what will happen? Will my children live in a age of catastrophic weather events and all? There's nothing you can do about it, but your mind will still go around it. So for the important thing is to be able to distinguish between actions and simply going around in those cycles. The second thing is, if an unresolved issue is important, you should spend dedicated time thinking about it. That is when you will push yourself to take actions around it. Otherwise, your mind will just go around it. It will become from a thought an action that needs to be taken. So if you have to pay your bill, you go and pay the bill, right? Or you can think, why is this being charged? This is unfair. These people keep changing the rates and they never let me know. The infrastructure for this has become cheaper. Why are they not reducing the rate? You can think a lot of things about things, but see what are the actions that you can do. If you can take actions, good. If you can't, then you have to let it go, right? If there are no actions you can't take, you cannot live in a state of constant conflict between what the world is and what the world you want it to be, right? So if you're saying I'm going to be happy only if the world is like this, and the signals you're getting from the world is like this, right? So same thing with elections, right? So every 4 years you get a vote. Either you're active in that, either you're writing some petitions, or you're filing RTIs, or you're making representations for certain work to be done. Okay, you're getting some things that actions are required. Otherwise, you can sit and consume information and get agitated about it, right? So see what are actions that are actually helpful. Information can be useful. Is it leading you to actions, or is it something that is just feeding one of those greed, aversion, restlessness, sloth, doubt, right? So that is what you see. Unresolved issues, you need to work on them. The other thing that happens is when you use the 6 R's, so when you are not intending to work on those unresolved issues and they're coming up, when you use the 6 R's, they stop being that wolf, right? So they start becoming less and less demonic in nature, right? So unresolved issues, the more attention you pay, the more craving you do, right? So you are stuck. Your life becomes, I want this, but the world is like this. So how can I be happy? So you've attached in that time, you have attached your outcome, your happiness with an outcome, right? You're saying if the world is like this, I'll be happy, otherwise I won't be happy. Right? And that is constant conflict. You're creating pain for yourself. When you use the 6 R's multiple times, you say that this is a thought that has come up. This is important and needs to be addressed. Can I take some action? Right? So you can take a step away. The more you get stuck in it, it's like a rabbit hole, right? So the deeper you go into the rabbit hole, the size of the rabbit hole becomes larger. You'll get more questions rather than answers, and you're not able to change the rabbit hole. So what's happening is when we use the 6 R's repeatedly with a certain pattern of thought, we start shrinking that rabbit hole. It's no longer something that you can't see the beginning of and you can't see the end of. You start seeing, okay, there are some actions that I can take. If I can't take actions, then why sit and worry myself about this, right? So why should I sit and worry about Chat GPT if I can't do anything about it? If there is a skill I can learn, let me learn that skill. But why and what will happen of the world? Why are these people not being reined in by the government? If you can vote for a law that will rein in Chat GPT, do that. Like, figure out what you can do. Don't be in a conflict with the world as it is, because the entire world and all the people in it, all the beings in it are not, if they all are just cooperating to make you happy, then that's a different thing, but they are not, right? So things will happen around you that are not to your taste, and you can either take action, or if you can't take action, you can make it an insignificant part. You, instead of a big rabbit hole that you disappear down, you can make it something. A thought came up, can I do something about this thought? Do I need to do something right now? If not, use the 6 R's and come back to what I'm doing. So your attention is the fuel for that thought. So your attention is for that rabbit hole to become big and become your entire universe in that moment. So try it. Identify at least, I would request all of you to identify at least one rabbit hole, something that you spend of, you suddenly realize that I've spent so much time thinking about this, right? It could be, it doesn't need to be something that makes you miserable. It could be also something that you want, that I want this, I want this. Because what happens is, if you want something and you like that very much, and it's possible for you to get it, but if you keep thinking about it, then you have completely made yourself vulnerable to getting that outcome. If you want it, you have some actions, you perform those actions, and then see if the rest of the world cooperates or does not cooperate with achieving that. Otherwise, you keep wanting that, and if it doesn't happen, you're setting yourself up for extreme dissatisfaction and disappointment. So bring your mind towards actions that you can take wholesomely. And a mind without craving will help you take wholesome actions. A mind with craving, right? So with an unresolved issue, you may be irritated, and maybe your child comes up to you and plays a prank and you just snap at them, right? So because your mind is there, your mind is not in a wholesome state. And another day, your mind is in a wholesome state, and the child comes and does the same thing, and you find it adorable. You have a beautiful moment with the child, right? So those are things that, not being in control of attention, making these issues into huge demons for us, right? And again, when I say making, it is not like you're doing it purposely, right? It is just the way attention works. If attention is going and if craving is underlying that thing, it will become big on its own. That is simply the natural, it's literally like gravity. It's how it will work. Okay. So if you want to deal with it, you have to use the 6 R's repeatedly. You know that this is something manageable. Some part of it is actions I can take, some part of it is actions I cannot take. So we want to get yourself to that stage with regards to everything in life. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
I'll just like to add, I think what she said about the unresolved issues is very interesting because there's a set of things that you're aware of, which will keep coming up. But in meditation, I've often seen that things that you probably have repressed and you're actually completely, it's not in your conscious mind. There are things that come up there also. So that's also an interesting part about unresolved issues. There are two
Yes.
parts, right, which you're aware of and you are kind of dealing with in your everyday, and stuff that you've just repressed and is not in your awareness. So
Absolutely. So that's why I call distraction our teachers. They're teaching us where our attachments lie. Right? So great point. Great reflection. Anyone else? Okay, you can. I'll give one more reminder. This group I know is a very capable and educated group. Please book your slots for check-ins with me daily. Interviews, check-ins are a daily phenomenon. Please book your slots so that I can check in on your progress and we can tweak it so you can have more fun during this retreat. Okay, great. So let us share some merit before we end the session. I just have one request. Tomorrow, one slot I have kept it open on my calendar. I'll just close it after this session, which is 8 to 8:15. So I will not be able to take that call. So I'll just change that on the Calendly. But please book your sessions for the rest of the week. Great. So let me just share the screen and let's share some merit. May suffering once be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May enlightened beings of mighty power share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. See you in the morning for the morning session or in the check-in.